Welcome back to Inside Politics. Today, our guest today is the Speaker of the Tennessee House of Representatives, and Cameron Sexton. Mr. Speaker, in the midst of all this scandal, you and the Lieutenant Governor were key sponsors of a campaign reform measure that the legislature approved in its final days. What changes will that law make, and how will it keep us from having another scandal? We seem to have one on the Hill somewhat in this area, about every 8 years.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I mean, you can try to prevent scandals, but if there's people who are willing to break the law or not provide factual information, there's nothing you can do to stop that. But what we try to do with this campaign finance is two parts. There's a member-driven, that's more transparency, more accountability about contributions, about expenditures, about campaign services, a whole host of stuff, photo IDs, making sure that the treasurer is who they say it is, since there was issues about fake people being created. Then there's also a second part about 501c4s and 5s and 6s and the dark money.
The dark money, yeah.
And making sure that if they're trying to influence an election 60 days before an election date, that they have to report those expenditures.
Have you done enough, or will more need to be done in the future? This is all you can get through in this session.
Well, we'll see. I mean, I think it's a very comprehensive bill that took on a lot of stuff, and so we'll let the dust settle and see what we need to do after this.
The legislature, as has been going on for years, continues to establish more commissions and things like that, and the legislature in recent years is beginning to appoint more of those people themselves. It used to be that was always up to the governor. Is the legislature starting to get into the executive branch and starting taking some of the jobs and responsibilities the governor used to do and maybe should be doing?
Well, I don't know about that. I think it's a debate about having a more diverse group of people that you appoint and having more representation across the state. Because if you have more people making those appointments, you may be having people make decisions about different types of people instead of the same type of people.
We had an awful lot of issues on the Hill this year about education. It's almost like the legislature has become a 132-member school board for the whole state. One of the new things that has come up this time, I think this is the existing board, but one of those where the legislature is appointing more people to it. This board's going to make decisions about what books should or should remain in schools or not taken out of libraries or the classrooms. Does that mean the state, and this could happen on a statewide basis, is now officially in the business of banning books?
I think what it does is it puts the state as like a court of appeal. So you still have the local librarian, the school system still determining what goes in the library. They have to provide a list to the parents about what's in the library. The parents have an appeal process if there's something in there they don't like, or if the school board removes a book that they don't like, there's an appeals process internally to handle that in the school district. We have a secondary appeals process that they can appeal to, which would be the State Textbook Commission, because you have to agree that sometimes there may be a book that's pulled out that either side may say should go back in. And so you give the same process, the same appeals process to both sides.
You just don't trust librarians and school officials anymore to get that job done? Is it that bad, that many obscene books running around in
Well, it's not that we don't trust librarians. It'd be like you saying you don't trust the judge on their first decision. Why do you need an appeals court to appeal the decision? And so all we're saying is it's like a court of appeals. There's a secondary appeals process. But there are books in certain libraries and all across the state, like Me, Earl, and the Dying Girl is one of them. That's very graphic. That is a problematic book that should be removed from the libraries.
Also, in terms of education, there's a new statewide K-12 funding formula. Lawmakers at first indicated they kind of wanted to take a year and look at it and vote for it and vote on it next year. That didn't what happened. What convinced you and other lawmakers this was the time to go ahead and approve this new formula?
Well, you have to remember it doesn't take effect this academic year. It's the next academic year. So we will be able to take this summer and next year to take a look at it to make sure that's correct and let more people take a look at it. But really the fundamental issue we have is we had a BEP formula that was funding the classroom like we're still in the 1980s when we're in 2020. And so the formula really brought us up to what we needed in the classrooms for today, not what we needed 40 years ago.
So there might be more changes to it next year when the 113th
There could be.
in?
I mean, one of the things is when you put something out there, it gives everybody the capability of taking a harder look at it over time. And if there's tweaks that need to be made, we'll do that next year.
Now, the present funding formula, the one that it's replacing, had lots of criticisms and lawsuits going on for years, both from the big cities and from the rural areas. Is that really going to change? And Nashville's feel like they're not getting enough new money. The rural areas are worried somehow this is going to force them to have to raise property taxes down the road to be in line with the new formula.
Right. Well, I mean, you can't stop lawsuits. People can sue for whatever reason. So saying that this is going to stop somebody from suing, I can't make that comment. But what I will say is under the old BEP formula, if we wanted to increase salaries of teachers substantially, the old formula would have forced the local economies and local governments to increase taxes more than the new formula ever would.
Bottom line for the taxpayers, what will this new formula mean in terms of student test scores? I know there's been a lot of concern, and the legislature's taken some actions to try to take care of the learning loss that occurred during the pandemic. Will this formula mean that we're going to see higher testing scores for students, and when will that happen?
Well, we hope so. You know, last year we put in the reading and math proficiency, the summer schools, to try to get us back up to where we were and get us more proficient, because we're not very proficient in that in the 3rd and 4th grade. This formula gives money to the kids based on the services they need, whether they're high poverty, whether they're in a rural economically disadvantaged area, or if they're taking certain vocational classes, or if they're a type of special needs classes that they need. So each individual kid is not treated the same as the old BEP. And so that money for one student may be more than the next, depending on the things that they need in the classroom.
Legislature is being criticized for passing laws that seem to be unfairly targeting specific groups. Lately, it's been criminalizing the homeless if they seek shelter or camp under roadway bridges or other public property. How is putting these unfortunate people in jail going to do anything positive?
Well, it's permissive. It doesn't mean they have to go to jail. It means they do get a warning before. We passed that bill just a little bit ago up here on the Capitol, where you can't camp out on state property.
But those people weren't homeless.
Well, you're assuming that all these people are homeless too. And so the other thing is, what you do have is you have people who are coming through who may be staying on bridges and roadways and access ways that is a safety concern. You had that issue here in Nashville, where you had a community of people who were homeless, those who were homeless, who were staying there, and it flooded. And so you have problems with some of the places they choose where they are. This just gives the law enforcement the tools to give them a warning and help move them to maybe somewhere else.
Another group the legislature is being criticized for picking on, they would say, is the transgendered individuals. Without any evidence, their participation in Tennessee, particularly in K-12 sports, was pretty much banned. This year, that ban was included to include college sports, not just K-12, with specific penalties for education officials who violate the law. Is this still a law seeking a solution? Because I don't hear a whole lot of people saying that there's a lot of transgendered individuals participating in K-12 or college sports.
Well, no, I'm watching that Ivy League swimmer who's a guy who's swimming against women and says that he's a transgender female now, and he's breaking all the records. So I think there is a problem out there. I think what we're trying to do is be proactive, not reactive. And so that's what we're passing, and we're trying to protect women's sports, and I think women appreciate it.
Cameron Sexton's our guest. He's the Speaker of the House of Tennessee House of Representatives. Back to continue our conversation with the Speaker after this break.